As some of you might have heard, we have a visitor here in Liberia with us at this time by the name of Matthew Graham. I always seem to forget his name. I don't know why that is. And he is from our Free Presbyterian Church in Kilkeel, Northern Ireland. Some of you might know that church because George McConnell comes from there. He is the one that is responsible for starting our bookstore.
Francis, are you still able to help us in UBS?
Yeah.
Okay. And he wanted to come out and help. Now, of course, this year we're restricting numbers. We're going to talk with Joanne Greer about that. We'll mention her to you. Joanne is actually a missionary that's been here for how many years now? 6? Right?
Yeah, I've been here for 6 years now. I came in 2012.
Right. I've been here 7 years. I came in 2011 of March.
We just saw Tina. She was outside, so we're very happy she made it on the flight.
She's not on yet. She's not on yet.
Well, I've been home a couple times for visits, but the big long absence was during the Ebola epidemic, and we were both taken out of here for 9 months actually, and we arrived back in May 2015, and so that's been kind of my second term here, I suppose you could say, for the last 3 years. Yeah, I think in general it's hard to get into a routine here anyway, because things keep changing, and when you've been away for a while, when you come back, quite often you have to pick up or maybe start again in some ways, in some parts of when we were away for 9 months for Ebola. Yeah, when I came back, it was kind of starting over again in some ways, just reestablishing some kind of routine. And
about 200 yards away from here is the really well-known Ebola clinic where a lot of people were taken that got sick. So is there no one here anymore? No one here anymore? All right, so there's some patients that are Ebola-ridden that are still here. So this is the clinic, and they're still seeing some people.
We left here in August 2014, and then we were away for 9 months. Came back in May 2015, actually one day before they declared Liberia free from Ebola.
Free Presbyterian Radio, 92.5 FM.
Your AccuWeather forecast for today, calling for intervals of clouds and sunshine with a shower or a thunderstorm around the area. High temperature 82 degrees. SRN News is next.
It's 11 o'clock.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington. Another Muslim terrorist group has begun wreaking havoc in Africa. International Christian.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest single step forward has been the opening of the radio station. Even personally for me, it was an immense encouragement.
I call to say thank you for Free Presbyterian Radio. Thank you that at least we have a conservative voice in Liberia at the moment, which we really need.
Some people may know that when I first came here, even when Remington County first came here, there were 4 churches associated with the Free Presbyterian mission work in Liberia. Up to this point, as of now, 2 of those churches have gone their own way, left just for different reasons.
He's up now at 15 feet. He's got 135 to go.
And so that closed down a big part of the work I've been doing with the children.
I'm only listening of the program, Free Presbyterian Radio. You guys educate me, you give me strength, you give me courage.
And so that was a challenging year, and sometimes I was wondering, where is this going? And then at the same time, our vehicles, the vehicle situation was just getting worse and worse. In many ways, I had to curtail a lot of the work I've been doing, even in Paynesville, because I just couldn't get there. Are we making any progress? What's the future here? And then at the beginning of the next year, we got the phone call in February from Liberia Telecommunications Authority that we could now test a frequency. Now that was a door suddenly opening, a door that we've been knocking on for several years because Mr. Dicani had been applying for this permission for 3 years now. How could we test? We had nothing. We had no money. We had no equipment. We had no radio tower. We had nothing. We had no programming. But the Lord really moved, and a gift then was given just a couple days after this tower was brought to our attention that would cover the cost of the tower and the installation, and so that was provided by the Lord in a very dramatic way, really.
Let the Bible speak, but also on behalf of the Free Presbyterian Church here in Monrovia to officially open Free Presbyterian Radio 92.5. May God bless every word that is broadcast from this station.
So our first broadcast from the property in Dwa Zone was on the 20th of April 2017, and the Lord has really provided since then. You could get a very good education just by listening to the radio all day. I know a lot of people can do that, but it actually is interesting. Quite a lot of LTBS programs from ministers and students and retired ministers of the Free Church. We have some other programs that we got through Randy Cornelius in Grenada, who's a missionary there, and he sent a lot of his programming, some from Bob Jones, like a few of the radio dramas come from there. There are things like Stories of Great Christians, biographies, programs about current events, worldview programs. When it first started, Mr. Dicani was asked, so what news source are you going to use? Because you're supposed to have news on here. And at that point, we certainly, it's a non-political station. So, our remit is not to cover politics, and we have to be careful not to do that. So to cover Liberian news without touching politics in Liberia would be very difficult. So we certainly weren't going to use any Liberian news source. And if we were going to give the news, we want to give the real news, not the fake news. And we don't want the liberal bias, like of the BBC, for example, which is basically all the world news that people hear here, that people get here is from the BBC. So just recently, we were able to get a 1-year contract with SRN, which is a Christian news station in America, Salem Radio Network. And we've been able to get that up on the R, just a 3-minute, 4-minute. Also, it means that if someone is listening to our station and something's going on in the world, they don't feel they have to switch to another station to hear about that breaking news event. It will be, so it may help to keep our audience with us, even if something else, big is going on in the world somewhere.
At this time, ELFP Radio concludes its evening broadcast and will resume again at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Who's that? That's Joanne.
Ever since I got here, I noticed that one of the big challenges and obstacles really to the children learning and even to adults learning, whether it's reading the Word of God for themselves or being able to take in what we're teaching them, is the lack of education, the inability to read for some of them. The illiteracy is a big problem here.
Joanne, William look like he lost some weight? He had malaria.
Oh, really?
And he never got treatment.
It's only about 48% of adults in Liberia, or young adults, can read and write. There are no doctors in Liberia. Well, Jacob has 4+ malaria. So.
4+.
Over 60% of the population is less than 24 years old. So about 44% are less than 15 years old. And so it's a very young population. And obviously then education is a very big need. If you don't register, you will not come to VBS. And the education system here is, as President Johnson Sirleaf, the former president, as she famously remarked in 2013, the education system is a mess.
Okay, the 9-year-old one, she can come, but the 3-year-old, she's too small.
I've been burdened more and more, Reverend Dicani, also about the need for a Christian school sometime in the future of this work.
We are fighting children to vacation by our school.
I've been starting to maybe take steps towards that just personally. So I did my master's education over 3 years. Started that in 2013, finished 2016. Part of it was to do a lot of projects in the country you're working in. So I did visit schools. So that gave me, it was valuable that it showed me some of the problems with phonics, but also it gave me a wider picture of the school systems in Liberia. There were a lot of issues. A lot of the government schools are just dire.
Lincoln, you coming to VBS?
Yes.
Yes.
I visited one and associated with another of the projects I did during my master's, and it was just incredible. I visited the boy I was working with, one of the kids in our church. He was in 2nd grade at the time. I spoke to one of the teachers there that day and had a conversation with him and was asking him about the widely recognized and acknowledged fact that many, many teachers live by bribery. You know, asking the children when they're taking a test, or telling the children, if you put 20 LD into your test paper, when you hand it back to me finished, you'll pass. If you don't, you won't pass. And that, I have been told that by so many people that happens very widely. Not in every school, but in a lot of schools.
Listen, ask your auntie, tell her it's July 2nd to 6th, we have to buy early. If she agrees that you can come, then come for your paper. Come tomorrow. Can you do that? Can you come tomorrow for paper? No? Yeah.
When I left that day, there were about 100 kids there. The teacher came in an hour and a half late. This was taken from a BBC news article, okay? And they said in 2017, in a spot check done, in government schools, teachers were only 40% likely to be in the classroom when they were supposed to be. There's a lot of people on the government payrolls who aren't actually teaching anymore. Some are called ghost teachers. They've died, but their families are still collecting their wages. And that has been reported to me by many people, and also I've seen that in articles as well.
I guess I should bring my backpack.
The kids are very eager to learn, and they're trying to learn all their memory verses and their Bible stories and their catechisms. I was surprised in Sunday school they were learning the catechisms, and they knew it better, some of them better than I was. They were just reciting them one after each other, and it was really heartwarming to be able to see that and to know that they are learning and they're willing to learn.
Who was Aaron and Eve and his son? King. What was he? Who was their second son? What was he?
Actually, Matthew and I I was telling Matthew this on the way home yesterday. The kids here are very good at memorizing. They have very good memories for oral, if you teach them orally. But to put something in their own words, it's very difficult for them. To think through something logically, it's very difficult. You know, asking, if you're teaching a Bible verse, asking questions about what is in the verse, or, you know, just picking out parts of the verse and what does this mean. Even the older kids, they struggle because of how they are taught.
Somebody comes saying, I've got a new message from God. What are you supposed to do with it? Are you supposed to just believe them?
I would say if we have a school someday, I would like it to be a reading intensive school, because that is one of the big needs, especially in the early years. And then, you know, developing that critical thinking from an early age. I think there's maybe a perception of Christian schools, you know, a Christian school where maybe their definition of a Christian school would be a school that follows the government's required syllabus, and you tack on Bible, and you teach the children Bible verses and catechism and Bible stories and maybe church history. But there are a lot more subtle issues that filter down through a government syllabus that people need to be thinking about with their children. Just the whole worldview. You know, everything that children learn is being taught to them from a particular worldview.
You can say something. What are you going to say?
For example, so when the baker in Denver refused to bake a cake for a same-sex couple, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in his favor, and this just happened this year, 2018, their headline, the BBC's headline, was something to the effect of Supreme Court snubs gay couple. The Conservatives' headline was Victory for Religious Liberty. We are here. We, with our discernment, can look at those two headlines and we know which one is correct. Fast forward 50 years, and a person who writes the textbook about this event in history, depending on that person's beliefs and worldview, they will choose which headline to put into their textbook. They can't put every headline in that was written about this event, so they're going to choose what they're going to put in. A liberal textbook author is going to put in the one about, you know, this is snubbing, this is discrimination, this is, you know, not love, this is, you know, hatred and all this. And children 50 years from now who are reading that will say, oh, look what happened, isn't that terrible? That's the fact, this is a fact of history.
What's the why saying?
So what is a Christian school? You need to look at what curriculum you're using. You need to look at the teachers that are teaching. They certainly must be academically qualified, and you cannot lapse on that. Because we are Christians, we have the truth, and everything we do must be to the highest standard possible.
Okay.